Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on the chrome hood of my rig, Big Red, as I navigated the endless expanse of desert highway. It was close to 3 a.m., and the only company I had was the low hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of a lonely cricket. This haul was different, a classified shipment of volatile chemicals destined for a research facility somewhere deep in the Nevada hinterlands. My usual GPS, Chatty Cathy as I affectionately called it, had gone silent an hour back, leaving me relying on a faded paper map that looked older than Route 66 itself. The map indicated a shortcut, a dirt road promising to shave a couple of hours off my journey. Desperate for a decent cup of coffee, and maybe a break from the relentless desert heat, I decided to take the gamble. Big mistake. The shortcut turned out to be a nightmare, a bone-jarring, washboard road that threatened to rattle Big Red apart. Dust devils danced in the distance, mocking my predicament. The gauges on the dashboard started flickering erratically, the temperature gauge spiking, then plummeting, the fuel meter dipping precariously towards empty. Then came the smell. A faint, acrid odor that tickled the back of my throat and made my eyes water. It grew stronger with every jarring bump, a sickly sweet chemical stench that filled the cab. Panic clawed at my throat. Was there a leak? One wrong move, one spark, and this whole desert could go up in flames. Pulling over on the dusty shoulder, I cautiously climbed out of the cab. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the desolate landscape. With trembling hands, I checked the secure cargo container bolted to the trailer. Everything seemed intact, the heavy-duty locks holding firm. But the smell, it was stronger here, emanating from the container itself. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. Maybe it was a faulty batch, some chemical reaction happening inside. My breath hitched as I remembered the ominous warning scrawled on the shipping manifest: extreme caution. Flammable and corrosive. Desperate for a signal, I clambered on top of the trailer, hoping to catch a sliver of cell service. Nothing. Just the endless expanse of desert under a sky now sprinkled with stars. Just as despair threatened to engulf me, a flicker of light pierced the darkness in the distance. A truck stop? A mirage? Squinting through the dust, I saw a faint glow on the horizon. Hope surged through me. Maybe they had a phone, a mechanic, a cup of coffee that didn't taste like dust. Big Red rumbled to life, the engine protesting the earlier rough ride. The truck stop loomed closer, a beacon of civilization in this desolate wasteland. But as I pulled up, my initial relief turned to unease. The place was deserted. The windows of the greasy spoon diner were boarded up, the pumps stood frozen in time. A single flickering neon sign, depicting a chipped cup of coffee, cast an eerie glow on the peeling paint. Then I saw it. Scrawled on the grimy diner window in a spidery hand was a message: "Don't let it spill." Fear turned my blood to ice. Don't let what spill? My voice echoed in the deserted parking lot, unanswered. The wind picked up, whipping a discarded newspaper against my legs. The headline screamed, "Hazmat truck overturns on I-80, driver missing." My breath caught in my throat. Was this a warning? Was there another driver out here, another truck carrying a similar hazardous cargo? And what did the message mean? Suddenly, a loud bang from the trailer made me jump. I rushed towards it, heart pounding. Holding my breath, I checked the lock. Still secure. But the acrid smell was now overpowering. Tears welled up in my eyes, a mixture of fear and frustration. I was stuck, alone, in the middle of nowhere, with a potentially volatile cargo and a cryptic message scrawled on a diner window. The first rays of dawn painted the sky a fiery orange as I sat huddled in the cab of Big Red. Exhausted, but determined, I decided to retrace my steps, hoping to find a signal, a town, anything. As I pulled away, I stole one last glance at the deserted truck stop. The message on the window seemed to mock me: "Don't let it spill." The ordeal left me shaken, a dark memory etched into my mind. I never did deliver the cargo. The return trip was an agonizing crawl. Every creak of the trailer, every flicker of the gauges sent shivers down my spine. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a dusty gas station just as my phone sputtered to life. A frantic call to the dispatcher explained my situation, the cryptic message, and the pungent smell. Within hours, a hazmat team arrived, decked in their protective suits, and carefully unloaded the container. The cause of the odor, they explained, was a faulty seal on one of the drums. Thankfully, the situation wasn't critical, but it could have been a lot worse. The company, however, wasn't thrilled. They suspended me for a week with a stern warning about unauthorized route deviations. A small price to pay, I figured, considering the alternative. But the experience left a mark. I quit hauling hazmat soon after, the desert incident a constant reminder of the fine line between safety and disaster. The memory of the deserted truck stop still haunts me at times, the message a chilling echo in the back of my mind. Don't let it spill. What did it spill? Was it referring to the faulty drum, or something more sinister? Was the warning for me, or for the driver whose story I read on the newspaper? Those are questions that remain unanswered, a mystery buried deep in the heart of the Nevada desert. One thing is certain, I'll never take a shortcut again, especially not one that promises to shave off hours on a lonely desert road. Chatty Cathy may have malfunctioned, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Sometimes, the most direct route is the safest one, even if it takes a little longer. Let's hop on to story number 2, but before I begin reading, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare for regular horror podcasts. The Wyoming night was a black canvas, punctuated only by the pinpricks of distant stars and the rhythmic rumble of Big Bertha, my trusty Peterbilt. It was close to 2 a.m., and the only company I had was the low hum of country music on the CB radio and the occasional crackle of static. Breaker 19, a gruff voice rasped through the speaker. Anyone on this lonely stretch of I-80? Be warned, there's a maniac out here. Semi with high beams like twin suns, tailgating everyone at a hair's breadth. I snorted, adjusting the volume on my favorite Hank Williams tune. Trucker superstitions were a dime a dozen, and tailgating, while annoying, wasn't exactly a monster under the bed situation. Yeah, another voice chimed in, younger and slightly panicked. He just passed me like a bat out of hell. Didn't even blink. Stay safe out there, y'all. Intrigued, I flicked the switch on my mic. Breaker 19 here. Sounds like a real psycho. Anyone get a description of this road warrior? Static filled the air, then silence. The cheerful twang of Hank seemed a little out of place now. A shiver ran down my spine, a prickle of unease settling in my gut. Suddenly, a pair of blindingly bright headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, growing larger with each passing second. I slammed on the brakes, Big Bertha groaning in protest, but it was too late. The road truck slammed on its brakes as well, mere inches from my trailer. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the back of the trailer, its paint job obscured by the glare. There were no markings, no company logo, just a blank canvas of menacing darkness. A loud, bone-jarring blast of the horn ripped through the night, making me jump. My hand instinctively reached for the air horn, but I hesitated. Engaging in a road rage duel with a mystery truck in the middle of nowhere didn't seem like the wisest course of action. Taking a deep breath, I shifted gears and pressed on the gas pedal, hoping to put some distance between us. But the truck behind me mirrored my every move, staying glued to my bumper. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped me. I tried switching lanes, hoping to lose him in the dark, but the truck followed relentlessly, its headlights boring into the back of my head. The silence from the CB radio was deafening. No pleas, no warnings, no desperate attempts to contact anyone. Just the oppressive silence and the relentless pursuit. Minutes bled into an eternity. My knuckles were white-knuckled around the steering wheel, my vision blurring at the edges. I was losing energy, both physical and mental. What did this guy want? Suddenly, an exit sign loomed ahead, Rollins 10 miles. Hope flickered in my chest. A town, a police station, anything. With a burst of adrenaline, I slammed on the turn signal and steered towards the exit. The truck behind me hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed suit. Panic surged through me. Exiting the highway wouldn't help. In fact, it might make things worse. Desperate, I glanced at the map. A small, dusty county road snaked off to the right, a shortcut I usually avoided due to its rough terrain. But right now, any option seemed better than the relentless pursuit. With a Hail Mary prayer on my lips, I jerked the steering wheel, sending Big Bertha onto the bumpy side road. The truck hesitated again, its headlights searching for me in the darkness. Then, with a deafening roar, it followed. The road was a nightmare, potholes the size of craters, dust devils swirling like angry spirits. But I pushed Big Bertha to her limits, the engine screaming in protest. I didn't dare look back, not wanting to see if the truck was still there. The minutes stretched into an agonizing blur. Finally, as the first rays of dawn painted the horizon, I spotted a cluster of buildings in the distance, a gas station, a diner, and a small motel. Civilization. With a final burst of speed, I pulled into the gas station, slamming the brakes. Jumping out of the cab, I sprinted towards the diner, ignoring the throbbing pain in my legs. The diner door creaked open, revealing a sleepy-eyed waitress. Gasping for breath, I blurted out, "Cops. Call the cops. There's a maniac trucker after me." The waitress, a woman with weary eyes and a permanent frown etched between them, stared at me blankly for a moment. "Trucker," she drawled, wiping down the counter with a damp rag. "Ain't seen no other trucks around here this morning. Just you." My blood ran cold. "But, the lights, the horn." I stammered, disbelief warring with terror. "He was right behind me." The waitress gave a snort. "Honey, you must be seeing things. Maybe that trucker lullaby on the radio got to you." She gestured towards the radio playing a classic country song. Exhaustion and doubt gnawed at me. Maybe she was right. Maybe the stress of the endless night drive, coupled with the unsettling trucker chatter on the CB, had played tricks on my mind. Just then, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard sauntered into the diner. He cast a curious glance at me, then at the waitress. "Here we got ourselves a trucker in trouble," he rumbled. The waitress gave a humorless laugh. "Says he was being chased by a ghost truck." The man's eyes narrowed. "Ghost truck, huh? Now you're talking. Didn't think I'd hear about those again." Intrigued, I pulled up a chair. "Ghost truck? You know something about that?" The man, who introduced himself as Hank, settled into the seat opposite me. "Heard stories from my grandpa, bless his soul," he said, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "Apparently, there's a stretch of road out there, somewhere between here and Laramie, where truckers vanish. No skid marks, no crashes, just gone. Some folks say it's a vengeful spirit of a trucker who died in an accident years ago. Others say it's a portal to who knows where." My stomach lurched. Was the relentless truck I encountered a figment of my imagination, or was it something more sinister? Hank leaned closer, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and concern. "But here's the thing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They say if you can outrun the ghost truck, it lets you go. Consider yourself lucky, son. Not everyone survives the chase." I stared at him, a million questions swirling in my mind. Was he just spouting local legends, or was there a sliver of truth in his words? Taking a deep breath, I thanked Hank and the waitress for their time. Truth be told, I didn't know what to believe. But one thing was certain, I wasn't sticking around to find out. Leaving a hefty tip on the counter, I climbed back into Big Bertha, the memory of the blinding headlights and the bone-jarring horns still raw in my mind. I didn't take the shortcut this time. I stuck to the highway, the rising sun painting the sky a hopeful orange. As I drove, I flicked on the CB radio, half expecting the silence to be broken by a chilling voice. But all I heard was the usual chatter, truckers discussing weather, road conditions, and the occasional joke. The experience left a lasting mark. I never saw the ghost truck again, but the memory of the chase, the uncertainty, and the lingering fear stayed with me. Whether it was a real encounter or a sleep-deprived hallucination, one thing was for sure, the desolate stretches of highway held more secrets than I ever wanted to know. And from then on, whenever I heard the trucker lullaby on the radio, it wasn't just a song anymore, it was a chilling reminder of the night I outran a ghost, or maybe, the night a ghost decided to let me go. The monotony of I-80 in western Nebraska was a familiar ache in my bones. Mile after monotonous mile of flat plains stretched out under a relentless summer sun. My trusty rig, Big Betty, rumbled along, the only sound breaking the silence besides the low hum of country music on the CB radio. I was on a week-long haul, hauling a load of lumber from Oregon to Chicago, and boredom was my worst enemy. Then, just past Ogallala, I saw it. A roadside billboard unlike any I'd ever encountered. It wasn't the usual advertisement for truck stops or fast food joints. This one was a simple painted scene, a lone, weathered windmill silhouetted against a fiery sunset. The colors seemed too vibrant, almost pulsating, and the windmill itself appeared oddly tilted, as if caught mid-gust. An inexplicable urge tugged at me. I slowed Big Betty down, my eyes glued to the billboard. It was like I couldn't look away. As I stared, something shifted in the image. The windmill seemed to creak ever so slightly, its blades catching the non-existent wind. A shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, a loud crack from the CB radio jolted me back to reality. Breaker 19, a gruff voice boomed through the speaker. Anyone on this stretch? Watch out for that creepy windmill billboard up ahead. Gives me the heebie-jeebies every time. My heart pounded. Had I imagined the movement? Or was there something wrong with the billboard? Before I could dwell on it, another voice chimed in. Relax, Rusty. Just a weird painting. Besides, you got bigger things to worry about with these summer heat waves. I chuckled, shaking off the unease. Truckers were known for their tall tales and superstitions. Still, the image of the shifting windmill lingered in my mind. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I ate a greasy meal at a truck stop, my appetite dampened by the strange encounter. As dusk approached, casting long shadows across the highway, fatigue began to set in. I decided to pull over for a quick nap at a rest stop. When I awoke, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. The clock on the dashboard blinked an accusatory 2:37 a.m. I'd slept for hours, way longer than intended. But the bigger mystery was how far I'd come. The rest stop was miles past Ogallala, much further than I remembered stopping. Panic clawed at my throat. Where were the last few hours? My memory was a blank slate. The only thing that felt vivid was the image of the pulsating billboard with the tilted windmill. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. Was the billboard messing with my head? Was I losing it? I tried to piece together the missing hours, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. The next day, the same thing happened. The hypnotic pull towards the billboard, the inexplicable loss of time, the waking up miles down the road with no recollection of the journey. This time, the windmill seemed even more distorted, as if its blades were spinning in slow motion, defying the physics of a painted image. Fear gnawed at my sanity. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out what was happening. Pulling over at a gas station, I inquired about the billboard with the creepy windmill. The old attendant, a man with rheumy eyes and a weathered face, looked at me with a mixture of pity and amusement. That one, huh, he rasped, his voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Been there since I was a kid. Folks say it messes with your mind. Makes you see things, forget time. My blood ran cold. Messes with your mind? How? The old man shrugged. Stories from back in the day. Truckers disappearing, strange lights in the fields near the billboard. Some say it's a portal to another dimension, others claim it's a gateway to the past. Just a bunch of trucker yarns, I reckon. But his words echoed in my mind, resonating with the growing fear within me. The gateway theory, as absurd as it sounded, seemed to fit the inexplicable time loss and the distorted reality I experienced near the billboard. Determined to break free from whatever hold the billboard had on me, I decided to avoid it at all costs. I switched to a back road, a bumpy, less traveled route, adding hours to my journey but offering a sense of control. For a while, it seemed to work. Days turned into nights, the monotony of the back road a welcome change from the hypnotic pull of the highway. But then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows, I found myself inexplicably drawn back towards I-80. It was as if an unseen force steered my wheels, a compulsion I couldn't resist. There, in the distance, loomed the familiar silhouette of the windmill against the fiery sky. This time, the scene on the billboard was different. The windmill was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of vibrant colors that pulsed with an almost rhythmic intensity. A primal voice, deep and guttural, seemed to emanate from the billboard, whispering nonsensical words in an unknown language. I slammed on the brakes, Big Betty groaning in protest. But it was too late. The pulsating vortex seemed to expand, engulfing the entire highway, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of swirling colors and distorted sounds. The next thing I knew, I was sprawled on the hard asphalt shoulder of the highway, the desert sun beating down mercilessly. Disoriented and confused, I scrambled to my feet, my head pounding. Looking around, I saw Big Betty parked safely on the opposite lane, engine still running. The billboard was back to normal, the lone windmill silhouetted against the now blue sky. But something felt different. The colors seemed less vibrant, the scene less captivating. The hypnotic hold it once had over me seemed to have broken. Panic slowly gave way to a strange sense of relief and exhaustion. There were no missing hours this time, no distorted memories. But the experience left me shaken to the core. Had I truly glimpsed another dimension, or was it all a terrifying hallucination brought on by fatigue and the strange power of the billboard? Back in Chicago, after unloading my cargo, I confided in a fellow trucker, a grizzled veteran named Hank. He listened intently to my story, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "The whispering billboard, he said, his voice low. "Thought those were just campfire stories. But then again, there are things out there on the road, things you wouldn't believe." He offered no explanation, just a knowing nod and a piece of advice: stay away from I-80, especially that stretch near Ogallala. Some roads are better left untraveled. I took his advice to heart. I switched routes, even if it meant longer journeys. The memory of the hypnotic billboard and the terrifying vortex remained a vivid scar on my mind. But sometimes, on a lonely stretch of highway at dusk, I swear I see a flicker of movement on a billboard advertising a forgotten gas station. A shiver runs down my spine, and I grip the steering wheel tighter, the whispering voice of the windmill a chilling reminder of the time I stared into the abyss and perhaps, for a terrifying moment, became a part of it. The billboard might be gone, its hypnotic power seemingly broken. But the experience taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the most terrifying things aren't monsters or ghosts, but the mysteries that lurk at the edges of our reality, waiting for a moment of weakness to pull you in. And sometimes, the only way to stay sane is to keep driving, to keep searching for the familiar, for the comfort of the ordinary, even on the endless, monotonous highways that crisscross this vast country. As the Louisiana humidity clung to me like a second skin, I drove Big Bertha, my trusty Peterbilt, down the endless ribbon of highway. My GPS, affectionately nicknamed Chatty Cathy, had broken hours ago, leaving me dependent on faded road maps and my own sense of direction. Not exactly my forte, especially when a neon sign advertising Mermaid Magic Live flickered in the distance. I had a soft spot for roadside attractions, a relic of childhood road trips with my father. He had taught me to appreciate the quirky charm of America's forgotten corners, a philosophy summed up in his favorite trucker's saying, "Sometimes the best detours are the ones that aren't planned." Ignoring the nagging voice in my head about deadlines and delivery schedules, I pulled off the highway onto a dusty side road. The Mermaid's Magic sign, now closer, promised enchantment for the weary traveler. Gravel crunched under Big Bertha's tires as I stopped in front of a ramshackle tent adorned with faded illustrations of mermaids. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the rhythmic hum of cicadas. It looked abandoned, the only sign of life a single flickering lantern that cast an eerie glow over the canvas entrance. Hesitantly, I stepped out of the cabin, the humid air heavy with the smell of swamp water and something else, a cloying sweetness that stung my nose. Curiosity fought caution and curiosity won. I pulled back the tarp and looked into the dimly lit tent. Inside, a single spotlight illuminated a makeshift stage and a lone figure wrapped in a shimmering sea green dress that glistened in the light. When I got closer, I saw her face. He was hauntingly beautiful, with skin the color of moonlight and eyes the green of seaweed. His lips curved into a sad smile, revealing rows of pearly white teeth. Then he began to sing. It wasn't exactly a song. More like a mournful moan that echoed through the store, vibrating in my chest. The melody, if you can call it that, was like nothing I had ever heard, mournful, but strangely hypnotic. My feet seemed nailed to the spot, a strange languor invaded me. The woman's voice filled the space, making its way to the corners of my mind. I felt a deep longing, an ache for something I couldn't fully understand. Suddenly, a thick fog rolled in, enveloping the tent in an oppressive blanket of white. Visibility was reduced to just a few feet. Panic clawed at my throat. Where did the fog come from? How long had he been standing there, hypnotized by the woman's song? I stumbled backwards, screaming into the thick fog. The woman's voice continued, now a haunting echo swallowed by the fog. My heart was beating at a frantic pace against my ribs. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, the fog began to dissipate. The stage spotlight flickered and went out, plunging the store into darkness. The woman was gone. The silence, previously broken only by her song, was now deafening. I fumbled for my phone, the weak beam of the flashlight piercing the darkness. My phone's battery was dead, another casualty of the encounter. Fear, cold and sharp, took hold of me. I was alone, trapped in a deserted tent in the middle of nowhere. I took a deep breath, pushed aside the tarp, and staggered back toward Big Bertha. The neon sign was gone. The only source of light was the distant glow of the road, a beacon in the darkness. Relief flooded through my system as I climbed back into the cabin and slammed the door shut. Starting the engine, I didn't look back. This was no enchantment for the weary traveler. This was something much stranger, something that chilled me to the bone. As I headed back to the highway, leaving the fog and deserted tent behind, I vowed to stick to well-lit truck stops and resist the lure of neon signs. Sometimes detours took you to places you didn't want to be, places where the only magic you found was the terrifying power of the unknown. The late afternoon sun dipped below the jagged peaks of the Rockies, casting long, ominous shadows across the winding mountain road. My trusty rig, Rusty, rumbled along, the radio crackling with static. I was hauling a load of medical supplies to a remote town on the other side of the pass, a journey I'd made countless times. This time, however, a traffic alert changed everything. A rock slide blocked the usual route, forcing a detour through the rarely used Thompson Tunnel system. Shouldn't add much time, the dispatcher chirped, her usual chipper voice sounding strained. Just a little longer, then you're golden. Little did I know, a little longer would turn into an eternity of darkness and creeping dread. The entrance to the Thompson Tunnel system loomed ahead, a gaping maw in the mountainside. Rusty huffed and puffed as I navigated the steep incline leading into its depths. The air grew thick and stale, the headlights illuminating nothing but endless black walls. Chatty Cathy, my trusty GPS, usually a chatty companion, suddenly went silent. A pit formed in my stomach. This tunnel system was notoriously confusing, a labyrinth of interconnected tunnels built decades ago. Without the GPS, I was on my own. As the minutes stretched into an hour, the tunnels began to feel identical. Each turn revealed the same oppressive darkness, the same damp, stale air. I popped a stale peanut from my emergency stash, the silence broken only by the rhythmic rumble of Rusty's engine and the gnawing in my stomach. Hours bled into what felt like days. My phone battery died, plunging me into a deeper abyss of isolation. The claustrophobia began to gnaw at the edges of my sanity. Every flicker of the headlights seemed to reveal menacing shapes in the shadows, only to disappear when I focused. Hallucinations? Was my mind playing tricks on me? The ever-present darkness fueled my paranoia. Was there even an exit to this labyrinth, or was I doomed to wander it eternally? Desperate for a sign, a flicker of light, anything, I slammed on the brakes, sending empty cans rolling across the floor of the trailer. Rusty shuddered to a halt. A distant sound. Was it just the echoes of my own engine? No. It was a rhythmic dripping, growing closer. Hope flared in my chest. Where there's water, there's usually an exit. Following the sound, I navigated a maze of seemingly identical tunnels until I reached a junction. A single, rusty sign pointed towards a dimly lit passage. Maintenance access, it read. Taking a deep breath, I inched forward. The dripping grew louder, and then, a sight that brought tears to my eyes, a glimmer of daylight filtering through a crack in the rock face. With a renewed surge of energy, I pushed Rusty forward, the tunnel finally opening up into a vast cavern. A group of construction workers stared at me in shock. "Lost your way, haven't you?" one of them said, amusement laced with concern in his voice. These tunnels, apparently, were undergoing major renovations, a fact nobody had bothered to update the navigation systems about. The relief was overwhelming. As they guided me out of the cavern and back towards civilization, I swore never to trust a detour sign again. The feeling of open sky and sunlight was a balm to my soul. Back on the road, a shiver ran down my spine as I glanced back at the mountain pass. The entrance to the Thompson Tunnel system was a faint shadow in the distance, a stark reminder of the terrifying darkness I had just escaped. Chatty Cathy might be silent, my supplies dwindled, and my nerves frayed, but I was free. And that, I realized with a grateful heart, was all that mattered.